What is going on, squids? It is Hank here from Nintendome, back with another Splatoon ThInk video. Yes, today we are finally going to be continuing the series on getting the perfect shot in Nintendo's Wii U third-person shooter, Splatoon. Of course, the most important facet of getting this perfect shot revolves around your positioning and movement, so check out that episode of ThInk before you watch this episode. As the title indicates, this video is going to be all about improving your aim. Now, before I get into anything, I want to emphasize the fact that the best way to get better at aiming is simply to practice. The more you play Splatoon, the better your aim will be. There are no secrets and tricks that will suddenly improve your aim tenfold, so it is important to be realistic as you watch this video. With that being said, it is also important to have the fundamentals covered so your practice is not in vain. So the first thing you must consider in order to improve your aim is whether or not you are using the correct control scheme and sensitivity. For control schemes, you're choosing between gyro, also known as motion controls, and sticks, also known as analog controls. I believe that gyro controls are more accurate overall, and they allow for quicker movements that you definitely need in close combat situations. They also give you access to buttons like the X button for jumping or the Y button for Y positioning while you aim with the gyro, a combination that clearly is impossible with the analog control scheme. However, there's also some jitter associated with gyro controls, especially when you are pressing down on the buttons I just mentioned. In my opinion, aiming with dual sticks is much harder, and to be honest, I think the sticks on the Wii U gamepad are simply not that great for shooters. They're definitely usable with longer range weapons, and at a competitive level, we have seen players like Japan's Yugo, or even one of the first S+99 players, D3RK, play with sticks. So I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that it is impossible to succeed with the analog stick control scheme. Personally, however, I prefer motion controls, as there's really nothing you can do with sticks that you can't do with sticks and a gyro, but the decision is ultimately up to you. Now on to sensitivity. People worry about this a lot, and I get asked questions about this all of the time. The first thing to keep in mind is that the sensitivity slider will actually impact both your gyro sensitivity, if you're using it, and your stick sensitivity. I would recommend going into the testing room and moving around while flicking the crosshair onto the dummies. Then after that, you can change the sensitivity up or down depending on how much you overshoot or undershoot. Keep in mind that negative sensitivities are better for weapons that require a more steady aim, such as long-range shooters and chargers, whereas positive sensitivities are better for weapons that require larger, more rapid movements like blasters and rollers. The number one aiming question I get asked is usually about keeping your shot steady. Lowering your sensitivity is definitely the number one way to go about achieving that. How can you properly adjust your aim to actually hit your opponents? Well, let's talk about some aiming concepts. The first aiming concept we are going to discuss is called leading your shots. Essentially, this means that you'll be shooting where you expect your opponent to move toward rather than where they are currently. A great example of this is shooting above your opponent as he or she attempts to swim up a wall. FLC, the retired captain of one of the first Splatoon teams, calls shooting where your opponents are currently aiming, and shooting where you expect your opponents to be tracking. I think using this terminology will be helpful for you guys if you want to discuss these concepts down in the comment section below that like button. Anyway, in order to master tracking, you really just need to practice predicting comet movement and escape options. For example, if you notice that someone is jumping and shooting a lot, you can easily predict where they will be, as fall trajectories are quite linear in this game. Of course, if you find yourself engaging with an opponent more than once, try to take note of any of their movement patterns and punish them for being predictable by tracking your shots correctly. It is good to keep this tracking concept in mind when considering your own movement against opponents, as they can easily use this against you as well. Shake up your approach and escape options so your opponents cannot predict you. The next aiming concept we are going to be talking about is strafe aiming. This is where you do not actually move your crosshair with the right stick or the gyro. Instead, you make fine adjustments by strafing left or right with your left control stick. This can be great for somewhat mitigating the jitter that is often associated with motion controls, as you are given more precision. Strafe aiming also has the benefit of making you a movement target for your opponent, so it is more difficult for them to shoot you. Keep in mind that while adjustments with strafe aiming are often more precise, they're also much slower than aiming adjustments you can make otherwise, and your opponents can definitely take advantage of this in firefights. You can somewhat mitigate this slowness by stacking some run speed up abilities. I found run speed up to be particularly useful for strafing with weapons like the Tech Splatter Shot or various splatlings. And while strafe aiming is great, do not get lost in this concept and forget to also aim with your right stick or gyro as well. It is very important to use both of these in tandem with each other for aiming. Another important aiming concept is looking through your crosshairs. I found that I miss a lot of my shots because I focus on the paint coming out of my gun rather than the aiming reticle itself. It sounds simple because it is, but it can make a world of difference for someone that is not currently doing this. Focus on where your crosshairs are and when they are actually in front of your targets. I found practicing by looking only with the crosshairs to be very effective. This can be limiting in real games as awareness of your opponents is very important, but it is a great way to, at the very least, learn this concept so you can use it practically in real situations. With all of this being said, keeping your crosshairs over your target and shooting will not always guarantee a hit, even if you have absolutely flawless aim. And that leads into the final concept that can help you improve your aim, which is, well, positioning. Beyond the concepts I discussed in the positioning and movement video, positioning itself is actually quite important for hitting your shots, as this game does have a random element, especially with slow firing weapons. Take the 96 cal deco for example. You'll notice that you can never hit all of your 96 cal deco shots, even with perfect aim. This is because Nintendo's implemented shot RNG, where weapons like the 96 cal deco will deliberately shoot slightly to the left or slightly to the right of your crosshair. The best way to mitigate this is by moving closer to your opponent. The closer you are, the less of a factor this RNG plays. It is also important to note that jumping while shooting will only amplify this RNG problem. So, despite what you might hear elsewhere, jumping while shooting is not very viable with many slow firing weapons. I talk more about positioning in the first part of this video series. Again, it is important to emphasize the fact that aiming is far from the most important skill you should focus on mastering in Splatoon. The perfect aim with poor positioning and poor movement is much less effective than poor aim with perfect positioning and perfect movement. For more information on this, definitely check out part 1 of this Getting the Perfect Shot series. Of course guys, the best way to improve your aim is with practice. Personally, I like to practice by going into the testing room, which you can access by hitting Y over your weapon in the gear select screen, and shooting the dummies. Practicing with weapons that require more precise aim, like chargers and squelchers, can translate into larger improvements for weapons overall, although I think it is still most effective to practice with whatever weapon you intend on using the most first and progressing from there. Be sure to emulate realistic situations. Swim around ink, pop up, and practice aiming quickly. After you develop the muscle memory to start hitting stationary objects, apply concepts like tracking your opponents to lead your shots and making fine adjustments with strafe aiming to hit moving targets consistently. Your perfect aim, once again, used in tandem with proper positioning and movement, will help you get the perfect shot, and you will be splatting entire teams of squids in no time. Anyways, please consider subscribing and splatting that like button with your perfect aim if you want to see more videos like this. I really hope this helped you out, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.